So here is the committee that is investigating things that were happening at the FBI, showing maybe political bias, people losing their clearance for questioning vaccines, people losing their clearance for a lot of different things, just being, in general, MAGA Trump supporters. So kind of interested in what's going on here.
Faith, direct attack on the First Amendment. Because he's a Christian, because he's a Catholic, because he takes his faith seriously, oh my goodness, we got to take his security clearance away from him, even though he served our country, decorated Marine, and held a security clearance for 20 years. That sure looks political to me, Inspector General Horowitz. Does it look political to you?
Well, Congressman, as I said earlier, we've seen issues with the FBI and how it's treated whistleblowers, frankly, across the spectrum. I agree with you, it's very concerning that would be done.
I'd like to see what instances there have been from people on the other side, like Democrat side, the far left side. What scenarios do they have of people actually getting their clearance suspended for being a liberal?
We know they're political because while all this is going on, they used the questionnaire. Isn't that right, Mr. Levitt? Isn't that right? They used this questionnaire to people they wanted to snitch on folks like Marcus Allen. They gave him a questionnaire.
Those were used in the case of a handful of employees, and I know that Mr. Horowitz's office is looking at that. I think it's important to note that the questionnaire wasn't the only thing, right? That these questions were asked across.
I'm talking about that the way they piled on to go after Mr. Allen and keep his security clearance and keep his pay from him for 27 months. And they did the same thing to Garrett O'Boyle. And what that has meant, as you indicated in your testimony, what that has meant to his family and Mr. O'Boyle's family. And this questionnaire said, did anyone ever vocalize support for President Trump? All right, you're allowed to say things about the President of the United States when you work in the FBI, aren't you, Mr. Horowitz?
I'm sorry.
You're allowed to say you support a president. Okay. You're allowed to say that in the FBI.
Apparently not. Apparently that makes you a whistleblower and you get fired.
Absolutely. Those questions are highly inappropriate.
And you're allowed to decide what kind of health decisions you're going to make with your own body, right?
Again, no. I can tell you firsthand in the military, if I didn't get the vaccine, they would have discharged me very quickly.
Those shouldn't be grounds for saying you're somehow disloyal to the country, but that's what they did. Highly inappropriate questions being asked of witnesses during security clearance investigations. That's your testimony, right, Mr. Horowitz?
That's correct.
And he got reinstated just recently. Marcus Allen you got reinstated, right, Marcus?
Yes, sir.
Why haven't they given you your money?
I am not aware why it's taking them 4 months to cut a check for all the back pay. I have no idea why it's taking that long.
They put you through pure hell for 27 months, falsely accused you. They go through the process. 4 people get reassigned because they agree with you, but the politics of Mr. Veltri, who, oh, by the way, as Mr. Levitt pointed out, is now running the second assassination investigation on President Trump in Miami.
I can't believe that he actually stayed there for 2 years working without pay. That blows my mind that he would continue to work. You'd think at some point he would think, this is getting kind of iffy, or maybe that's what they wanted. They wanted him, they suspend his clearance and then he quits, and then maybe they reinstate his clearance or whatever, and then they try to say, oh, well, you quit. So that's how we were weeding all these people out. What's going on, Jared?
I find that just astonishing. And they won't pay you.
Right, we're still waiting for the payout.
When was the final agreement? When was the final settlement with the FBI? What was the date, Mr. Levitt?
June 1st.
Well, they've had time. Doesn't take that long to write a check, for goodness sake. So he's still in waiting. That's how our FBI treats a good man who has served our country for 20 plus years. It's ridiculous. And yet the Democrats say there's no weaponization. You got to be kidding me. My time has expired. I now recognize the gentlelady from California.
Funny that he mentions that. I'm still waiting for final pay from the military from May. Still. Not to say that I was a part of this weaponization, but the whole process just pisses me off. It's like that scene from Office Space. Man.
So you want to talk about weaponization of the Department of Justice? Let's talk about it. Because sadly for Republicans, weaponization tends to be in the eye of the beholder.
There we go.
They delight in talking about false allegations of politicized attacks on Republicans. But I want to talk about the real weaponization, the one that would come from a second Trump-led Department of Justice. We are already watching in horror as women across the country lose their autonomy, their dignity.
Okay, so she literally just said nobody's being held or getting their clearance suspended because they're a Republican, but we're going to suspend you because you're a Trump supporter. Is literally what she's saying.
And even their lives because of draconian abortion bans in dozens of states, which Trump delights in, he brags about.
And you're okay to not like Trump and to think his policies are total bullshit. That's fine. What you can't do is suspend somebody's security clearance for voting for a candidate that you don't like. You're not making a good point here.
Choosing the Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe v. Wade. And if we get into a second Trump presidency, the weaponization we are witnessing will be orchestrated by the DOJ at Trump's demand. Trump's Project 2025 mandate for leadership calls for some of the most restrictive abortion and healthcare bans imaginable. In short, it lays out the path to eradicate reproductive healthcare and women's privacy. It calls for the CDC and HHS to closely monitor and report on individual women's health and abortions.
What is she talking about here? This has nothing to do with what the issue is. This is literally like going the memes where they're like, but Trump, orange man bad. That's literally what she's doing. That's not really the task at hand here.
Keeping track of when women travel across state lines to seek reproductive health care and at what stage of their pregnancy they're in when they do. And alarmingly, it calls for the DOJ to criminally punish abortion providers who distribute abortion medication through the mail. Mr. Kirshner, one of the proposals I mentioned is for the CDC to track women's movements to access abortions across state lines. The mandate also calls for the president to be able to direct the investigations and litigation by the FBI and the DOJ. So hypothetically, even though that CDC-related part of the proposal didn't mention DOJ prosecutions, there are risks that a far-right government outlined in Trump's Project 2025, collecting that data, could weaponize it against the women seeking health care in a criminal
Does the Hatch Act not apply to these people? I don't think it does because it's just a committee.
context. Is that correct? So in other words, it would be possible to take CDC data about women who have sought abortions and direct the DOJ and the FBI to target those individuals. Is that correct?
It is, yes. Tracking women who are pregnant, it's horribly reminiscent of, tracking and hunting animals. It really
like stalking.
It endangers people.
It's like stalking. Let's be honest. Tracking.
So specifically when it talks about the Hatch Act, it says the Hatch Act is an act to prevent pernicious political activities. Is the United States federal law that prohibits civil service employees in the executive branch of the federal government, except the president and the vice president, from engaging in forms of political activity. So possibly not those folks. Trump has said multiple times he has nothing to do with Project 25 and wants nothing to do with it. Yeah, he has. And they still continue with this stuff. Well, and that's not even the point. This has nothing to do with any of this craziness that they're talking about, Project 25. It really comes down to, are you allowed to support a running candidate, the main candidate? We're talking about the leading candidate, the nominee pick on the Republican platform. Are you allowed to support them? That's literally what this comes down to. She's running all to this other stuff like, oh, Trump supports abortion, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. You don't like that? Don't vote for him. That's not the issue at hand. The issue is that this guy supported that candidate, and now you suspended his clearance and didn't pay him for over 2 years and kept him working while not paying him. They may as well use this BS hearing for something. Remember when the CDC wanted to do all of these same tracking avenues with COVID? Yes, absolutely. Trump is lying his ass off. They are all his people. And he can be. Even if he supports Project 25, that's not the issue here. The issue here is that somebody got their clearance suspended for supporting a political candidate. You could not like him, but what you can't do is suspend his clearance. That's stupid. That's just wrong. That is a overstep of the government.
In the movements of women. The mandate also calls for the enforcement of restrictions on DOJ grants to comply with conservative ideology, such as prohibiting sanctuary cities from receiving federal funding. Would it be possible then that DOJ grants could be conditioned on jurisdictions limiting abortion or other healthcare access?
Under Project 2025, it seems like the sky is the limit.
Thank you. These extreme restrictions are far from the only alarming agenda points in Trump's Project 2025. The document also calls for dismantling the Department of Education.
This is an HR issue? No, this goes beyond HR. It's not an HR issue. It's a Special Security Office issue. More than likely, the people watching this kind of committee is smart enough to fall for all of this campaigning, and I'm sure this happens from both sides. Oh, yeah, for sure. Ma'am, this is a Wendy's. She's just going on a tangent. It's like she just wants to hear herself talk. She is so blinded by their hatred of Trump that she just felt like she needed to bring this out there. And she feels justified because she hates Trump so much. She can't take herself out of the picture and objectively look at the situation and say, hey, other people can think different than me. And they can support different candidates. That's why we have an election. That's why we vote for our president. And if they vote for somebody different from me based off of their different political beliefs, that's okay. I'm not going to rob them of their income and stop their family from supporting themselves. All of this nonsense, you know?
Which former President Trump claimed he would do during a rally in Pennsylvania just this week. It calls for allowing businesses to discriminate against protected classes. It calls for reversal of the LGBTQ plus equity focus of the Biden administration. And if any of these proposals were to be challenged in court, Trump's corrupt Justice Department, led by loyalists, would defend these awful provisions. Mr. Kirshner, if any of these offensive proposals are challenged, they will be defended by the Department of Justice. What could be the result if the DOJ is more loyal to President Trump than to the Constitution?
You know, they could decline to take up challenges, or they could decide to take up challenges not based on the rule of law, not based on, what is right for the American people, but based on the whims and preferences of a president.
And Mr. Horowitz, my final question is for you. Would we want agents at the FBI or any other government agency who would be seeking to promote any cause that might conflict with the Constitution, whether that be religious or ideological or loyalty to an individual rather than the Constitution?
We would not. We swear our employees in with an oath to abide by the Constitution, the laws of this country.
So does it seem like a great idea to scrap our complete civil service and pack every federal agency with people that are loyal more to an individual than to the Constitution, or more to religious ideology, or more to some other kind of ideology?
I think over the years, Congress has found where the appropriate balance is between having non-career officials and political appointees leading agencies on policy issues and having a career civil service.
Thank you.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes.
President Trump has never read Project 2025, much less.
Mic drop. Boom. He's never read it. Shut up. I think they are using these committees like this so they can claim that they fought against Trump in their campaigns, which has nothing to do with the committee itself. Possibly. It could just be for theater. Objectively, Trump is dangerous, in my opinion. And that's why you get the ability as an American not to vote for him. If you don't like him, you don't vote for his punk ass. You vote for somebody else. They also make this Project 25 a living entity per it being changed to fit the narrative. Yeah. I've never actually read Project 25 because I don't think it really matters, but it feels like they're just making shit up as they go along. And they know no one else has read it either, so they're just kind of like slipping things in there because he doesn't read derp. Who? Me? For the Project 25 shit? I'm not going to read that. Why would I read it? That seems like a big ass waste of my time.
adopted it. Unlike the viewpoint adopted by the sitting vice president, which is that we should have taxpayer-funded sex change operations for illegal aliens in prison. And I try to be a little open-minded when I hear a provocative argument, and I just sort of wonder, when would I be in favor of tax?
See, they're bringing up the big battles of Democrat versus Republican. They're not going to solve that here. These people are never going to dump, not you. Yeah, okay, I get it. Trump's never read it. Trump's probably never read Project 25 either. He doesn't know any of this shit. But what it seems like is they're just making stuff up. They just keep going with, oh, it does this and this and this, and nobody's read it. Nobody knows what's going on with it because nobody cares, because nobody has claimed to support it. As long as the military member doesn't show up to any political rally as a military member, they can support who they want. These people should be held to the same standards. Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is obviously they have their political affiliation. You got these people, you brought them in as a committee, and now they get to argue their issues, which just becomes Democrats fighting Republicans, and there's never any solution to any of this. And they're bringing up these major issues of the election, like rights for abortions, which that has nothing to do with what this committee is actually supposed to be for. The committee is about that guy being a whistleblower, claiming that he was suspended on his clearance because he's a conservative. They're saying that he was targeted because of his Christian beliefs. That's what the committee's actually for. It's not for them to get together and be, I'm Democrat or I'm Republican. That's not it. There's a step back and there's an overview of what they should actually be looking at. But instead, they've ran out this whole thing for 2 hours to not even talk about the issue at hand.
Taxpayer-funded sex change operations for the illegal aliens. And maybe if it was mandatory, maybe if it wasn't optional, but mandatory, it would be a pretty substantial deterrent at the border. But to the matter at hand, Mr. Allen, it's good to see you again. You came last year and you told us about these terrible things the Department of Justice was doing to you. And you've testified today, you still don't think the Department of Justice has treated whistleblowers like yourself and others fairly. Is that your testimony?
That's correct. The treatment is unfair.
Do you agree with that assessment, Mr. Horowitz?
As I said in my testimony, Congressman, I think putting someone like Mr. Allen on unpaid leave for 2+ years is unfair while you're trying to adjudicate.
Yeah, no, I get that.
There needs to be a process here that happens promptly.
The process was to punish these people and to make an example of them. That's obvious to everyone. They saw improper actions at the FBI and DOJ. They blew the whistle on it, and then the process was the punishment, and it was the point. I think that's how Mr. Allen feels. Is it?
Correct. The process in this instance definitely felt like the punishment.
Yeah. So they've done it to you. They've done it to others. Mr. Horowitz says it shouldn't have been done. And so now I want to be a little reflective about this with Congress. Mr. Allen, you've seen, since you have given us this testimony, us continue to pass continuing resolutions that put no consequence on the DOJ or the FBI for what they've done to you and your colleagues. Do you think Congress has appropriately protected whistleblowers?
I do not, Congressman, and I think the policy recommendations can be put forward that there can be bipartisan support for to protect whistleblowers going forward in the future.
Absolutely. I mean this in no way as a partisan critique. Matter of fact, it's a bipartisan critique that we all own. Because we see the evidence that you get mistreated. We hear from the experts like Mr. Horowitz that this is totally off book. It's obvious to anyone with a brain they're doing it to hurt you and to make an example out of you. And what do? We just sign the check and we just send it over. You know what we should put in any continuing resolution? That until you get paid and until the rest of the whistleblowers get their back pay, maybe the FBI director doesn't get his paycheck.
At least now he's back on topic, though.
Maybe the attorney general shouldn't get his paycheck. Maybe the FBI director shouldn't get the use of the private jet that he likes to fly around the country on so much. They enjoy all of the accoutrements of their position, and you end up screwed. And we're okay with it, apparently. Any member who votes for these continuing resolutions is voting to perpetuate the punishment that has been instituted on the whistleblowers. And while we want to talk about the weaponization of the Justice Department, rightfully so, we write the check for it and we underwrite the debt for it. And it is sickening to me. Mr. Horowitz, I got a few questions for you since we got you here. Now, the CIGI is the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, right?
That's right.
And you're the past chair?
I was the chair from 2015 through 2020.
Does it have any binding legal authority?
In terms of, I mean, it was created by Congress as an agency.
Yeah, but does it have like legal authority to issue subpoenas that it can compel?
It has not been given subpoena authority.
Okay, so what I wonder is where this group CIGI, I'll just call it the Integrity Committee, like what happens when they start interfering in the work of IGs to expose corruption? Who adjudicates that?
So Congress actually created the Integrity Committee again back in 2008, gave it its authorities. The Integrity Committee puts forth a set of policies and procedures. It's required to provide them to Congress. That's the mechanism.
Yeah, but in a state of conflict, right, where you got an IG working to expose corruption, and then you've got the CIGI hassling the IG, who resolves that?
Well,
because I mean, nobody in the CIGI is not, the head of it's not like confirmed by the Senate, but IGs are confirmed by the Senate.
Yeah, and it probably in part depends on, there are two types of IGs. There's presidentially nominated Senate confirmed IGs. There's an agency IGs.
I'm going to pull it up, Paul.
For presidentially nominated Senate confirmed IGs, ultimately it's up to the president to decide what he wants, because the report goes.
All right, here it is. What'd you say? If I was a whistleblower, I'd be like, I'll vote for whoever gets me my money. Yeah. This is what Paul was talking about. At least I think it is. This is the first one that came up for New York Post. It says, FBI whistleblower probe for peddling extremist propaganda from Real Clear Politics. All right. So he was investigated and later had his security clearance pulled for peddling extremist propaganda after he forwarded news articles to supervisors and colleagues from so-called questionable sources, including well-known political news and polling aggregator Real Clear Politics. I'm not familiar with Real Clear Politics, but I'm going to assume it's Real MAGA News Network. FBI staff operations specialist Marcus Allen had his clearance suspended in January 2022, 4 months after emailing the links from questionable sources, which flagged him as an insider threat, according to a Thursday letter from the whistleblower nonprofit Empower Oversight to a congressional committee. Yeah. What did he post, though? What was the article? Email questioned the accuracy of FBI Director Christopher Wray's testimony before Congress earlier that year concerning the degree of involvement of the Bureau's confidential human sources at the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. Okay, that doesn't sound that crazy. So extreme propaganda is bad, but underage adult like photos good. And we all know politicians from both sides share those. The Post reviewed a portion of the unclassified investigatory file on the former FBI staffer, which shows that the Bureau made the determination about Real Clear solely based on an analyst's open source research of a ranking provided by the website Media Bias Fact Check. Okay, so that sounds real legit too. Allen's email also cited reports that had originated with the New York Times. Okay, that seems fine. Empower President Tristan Leavitt noted in the letter to House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan that confidential informants were present at the Capitol. So, okay, but that came from New York Times. That's where I call it not okay. I don't know I don't know this real clear politics. We're assuming that's probably a MAGA news site, but still, he's just posting OSINT material. Is that something really to suspend his clearance about? Like, is that really something that we should be doing? I don't think so, in my opinion. I haven't seen anything that he did that was so dangerous that they really think that he was an insider threat.
Opposed to the president.
And the presidential power, not to get into a constitutional, a regression here, but the presidential power is vested in the IG, not in this administrative committee, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you. We now go to Mr. Connolly, but would you indulge me to just clarify something?
Certainly.
Inspector Horowitz, you are Senate confirmed and you were the head of SIGI, is that correct?
Correct.
I just wanted to make it clear.
Yeah, I was Senate confirmed for DOJ IG.
Right.
I think the point was that the chair of SIGI doesn't have to be Senate confirmed. I happen to be Senate confirmed sitting in that position.
Thank you. I just want to make that clear. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair. Mr. Kirshner, and by the way, I apologize, at least on behalf of this side of the committee, for a disparagement characterizing your testimony. I don't think we should ever do that in a committee. We don't have to agree.
Thank you, Representative Connolly. I'm from New Jersey, so I've suffered worse.
I'm from Boston originally. We don't like that. Mr. Kirshner, Mr. Levitt's client, Garrett O'Brien, posted the names and personally identifying information, including parts of home addresses, for 4 current or former FBI officials. In August, Kyle Serafim, who has hosted multiple podcasts with Mr. O'Boyle, tweeted, and I quote, "The people who left Garrett O'Boyle's family and my family homeless should experience what guys like us are prepared to do to evil." Unquote.
Be nice, Jared.
Mr. Kirshner, you served in the FBI.
We don't do that here.
What's wrong with identifying FBI officials' partial addresses, hometowns, personal information, and making a threat? You may justify it because you think they're engaged in evil, but that's a direct threat from the way I read it. What could go wrong with that kind of thing? And isn't that the kind of threat of violence that I think, ought to be examined by a weaponization committee as opposed to what we're doing here today? Your view.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I wasn't with the FBI, though. I was with the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, right up the street there. But I'll tell you, I worked closely with the FBI, the Washington Field Office, directly across the street from my former office. And, we moved heaven and earth to prevent personal information from getting out about our witnesses, about people we were investigating, so as they, to prevent them from being unfairly, perhaps, smeared with an investigation that didn't result in an indictment. And, I had my fair share of witnesses killed in Washington, D.C., because their information got out. They were labeled as snitches. And then I had to sit with the families of a witness and talk about, how very sorry I was for what happened to them because that information.
So while we're bemoaning the alleged mistreatment of certain individuals, including some here today, which may not be true, we're escalating it with actual threats that could lead to violence, even death. Is that correct?
You endanger the lives of folks when you put that kind of information out into the public square.
Certain irony when we're worried about weaponization, while meanwhile some of the people we purport to be advocating for are engaged in this kind of activity threatening FBI agents. Mr. Horowitz, there have been allegations made that the FBI has weaponized security clearance revocations to target and root out conservatives at the Bureau. Have you found any such evidence of a broad pattern of trying to target conservatives and revoking their security clearances?
We have not made such a finding.
Have you made any findings that the FBI security clearance process targets Christians?
We have not made such a finding.
Have you made any findings that the FBI leadership is targeting military veterans?
We've not made such a finding.
Have you made any findings that Jeffrey Veltri, now the special agent in charge of FBI's Miami field office, was biased against conservatives?
We haven't made any findings with regard to Mr. Veltri.
And have you made any findings that the FBI wrongly revoked the clearance of former Special Agent Garrett O'Boyle?
I'm not going to speak to any particular case because we have matters ongoing. And so as I'm answering those questions, I'm talking about what we've done as of today.
We'll stipulate that. But would it be fair to summarize your answers to the previous questions? You haven't found any pattern of ideological or religious bias by the FBI with respect to those issues. Is that correct?
That is correct. What we found, as I mentioned earlier in our past work, is frankly issues on occasion with FBI and frankly other law enforcement agencies and other parts of the department acting inappropriately with regard to whistleblowers.
That's different than a pattern.
That's different than a pattern.
That's different than a pattern. Finally, Mr. Kirshner, as a child of the 60s, I find it almost humorous to hear characterizations of the FBI as this hotbed of liberal, if not leftist, ideology. I'm going to give you the last word on that. It seems to me the FBI has always been a fairly conservative culture and certainly a right-of-center political bent if there was one. What's your view?
Yes, sir. And I had a lot of knockdown, drag-out discussions with lots of FBI agents over the course of the course of an investigation, whether we should indict, who we should indict, what we should indict. But I never believed any of it was born of politics or their ideological beliefs or preferences. It never was, in my experience. That's why I find this topic a little curious.
The gentleman's time has expired. I'll now recognize myself. Inspector Horowitz, would it be fair to characterize you as one of the institutionalists of the IG, long-serving, and a career that, without patting yourself overly on the back, but deservedly, that has been about promoting the responsible behavior of the IG and the performance of their duty?
Congressman, that's certainly how I viewed myself, my responsibilities through my time here as IG.
Well, that's how this committee and other committees of the Congress view you for your years of service, and I want to thank you. This is a difficult hearing because many people perhaps would like to make this not about weaponization. But in your many years of experience, the personal actions of individuals, for whatever reason, including an unstated bias, leads to bad conduct, including HR wrongdoing. Is that correct?
That's correct. And one of the hardest...
Gerald, seriously, stop. We're not going to insult people. That's going to get you banned.
Jobs we have, as you know from the work you've worked on, I've worked on, is understanding and figuring out motives.
And you often never know the motive. You only know that the action was inconsistent with policy, law, and the like.
That's correct. But we do our best, for example, in the Fast and Furious work, the FISA work, others, to look at as much email, text messages, instant messages, et cetera, to try and understand whether there was evidence of motive or what the evidence of motive was.
So leaving motive out for a moment, in the case of the way the pulling and withholding of these clearances was done, is that clearly inconsistent with policy, procedures, tradition, and the fair treatment of an employee?
Actually, it actually was somewhat, in many ways, consistent with the policies, practice, and procedures, which is why I think there are several policy issues that are important to talk about in terms of reforms, and I know the submissions here have raised some of them.
So, you're an attorney in addition to other things. The law is not always about fairness.
Unfortunately, that...
Apparently the Harris campaign office in Tempe was attacked last night. Really? How were they attacked?
That's true.
And would you characterize that this is an example where, even if marginally supported by law and regulation, it is by no means a fair way to treat somebody?
I agree. I think, as I've said, it was consistent with policy to allow someone like Mr. Allen to be out of his job on unpaid leave for more than 2 years and try and fight that process.
So not only does Congress need to find a way to prevent these unfairness, but we also suffer from the fact that this can be done for no reason or for an unknown reason. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think that is some of the key
Apparently pew pew shots. Oh, wow. Let me look for it.
That are here before all of you, which is Mr. Allen had an ability to challenge this, as limited as it was, because he was alleging a whistleblower retaliation. He wouldn't have that same opportunity, but for the fact he was alleging retaliation for whistleblower.
Mr. Issa, can I add to that?
Yes, please.
Mr. Horowitz is talking about the procedures of protecting, so going through and appealing. But I think it's important to remember that substantively, this whole process started because Mr. Allen made a protected disclosure, and several of the things in Mr. Horowitz.
And I want to get to that. Going back to whistleblower retaliation, under the intent of our whistleblower statute, we intend to protect a whistleblower normally from all retaliation, including any loss of pay. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
let's see what's going on. She's gonna get her hero badge here, right? Just like Trump got his second one. Says Kamala Harris campaign office attacked, multiple gunshots fired. This is the second time in recent weeks that Harris campaign office has been attacked. Okay, so they got to match Trump, of course. There were reports of gunshots when identified persons fired bullets at the campaign office of Vice President Kamala Harris, located in Tempe, Arizona, on the early morning of September 23rd. With regards to the rise of political insecurity in the country. The break-in occurred around 12:30 a.m. and police later confirmed in the morning that the DNC employees had found signs of gunfire. Interesting. No one was in the office at the time of the shooting, so that's good. No casualties. However, he was very clear about the dangers of the incident and said this raises concerns about the safety of those who work in that building and those in the vicinity. Why am I getting this is staged vibes? Like they needed a win from all of the Trump assassinations. Why am I getting that feeling?
had the agency made what would have been a finding of whistleblower on the front end, notwithstanding, whistleblowers don't have to be right. They just have to be whistleblowers. Had they made the finding that was clear, then he would not have lost a day's pay because they would have treated the pay in some way as a whistleblower.
Right. If as long as they thought he had a reasonable belief in what he said, they should not have taken a personnel action against him.
Okay, so in a little bit of a circular item here, and again, I'm staying away from motive for a moment. Certainly the tools were available to not deny him 1 day of pay, and ultimately the resolution is someday in the future, not yet, not after 4 months, he will get made whole in theory in pay, but in fact, it never had to be that way, and the judgment used in this case is suspect.
Yeah, and that is exactly why, Congressman, we put out the management alert we did, to point out the fact that you don't need to put someone on unpaid leave while you review an allegation against the person. You can find other opportunities for them, other positions they can continue to work in, even if you think they shouldn't have the clearance.
Thank you. Thanks for making that clear. We now go to Congresswoman Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses. So once again, MAGA Republicans are here talking about.
Oh my God, here we go again with this MAGA stuff. That's what I was thinking in some pics with the article. Not sure if it's actually the real pics, but all look like 22s. Yeah, I don't know, man. Because even in the article, it specifically had to put the second attack and then 2 Trump attacks. It all lines up a little fishy to me. Just saying.
Something that, quite frankly, seems to just be made up. And I think I want to just stick to talking, Mr. Kershaw, because I know you've already talked some about Project 2025, and we've talked about several aspects of it. But one thing that has caught my eye, of course, is that Project 2025 is filled with anti-immigrant proposals that will continue to perpetuate cycles of racist policies, unnecessary, inhumane detentions of human beings, and ineffective and dangerous border policies. The project calls to dismantle asylum, to militarize our border,
What does that have to do with this guy getting his clearance revoked? What at all does that have to do with anything? Even if that was a Trump platform, who cares? What does that have to do with anything? Nothing. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to do like a gotcha moment so they can have clips go out and people vote for them because of that. I think that must be what they're doing. They must be just trying to get the clips. The shooter was probably weak and cried that the 22 was too loud and powerful. I picture piercings and blue hair. Maybe that's why he missed.
Order, that's at page 555. And also to pursue the promulgation of every rule related to immigration that was issued during the Trump administration, that's at page 568, and to challenge any checks and balances against the president's authority over immigration.
Does the speaking lady or the lady speaking have eyes? Man, you're cold. Are you seeing what's happening right now all over the world? I mean, you take a look at any place and you've got islands that won't be there soon, dictators at an impasse, you've got destruction. Let's not think that way, man. Let's think that there actually is good in the world and everything's going to be okay. You got misery all over the place, and soon, if things don't get better, we might be seeing nut jobs, crackpots with nuclear weapons, and we'll be seeing workers lose their value to the rich. We can't go there, man. We can't. They're still good. The world's not terrible. So you have this huge armada of artificial intelligence, all things they can do and all the things they'll do, and they'll have no need for humans to work jobs, so they just kill us. No.
Page 568. So once again, he wants complete authority, and he being Donald Trump. The project's mandate for leadership takes particularly aim at sanctuary cities. You know, one of the things about sanctuary cities that is always mentioned is that victims of crime that happen to be immigrants, you know, feel comfortable in being able to complain or if they're witnesses to a crime. So, Mr. Kirshner, you've served as a prosecutor for 30 years. I've been a lawyer and a judge. We understand the importance of law and order and holding violent criminals accountable. So what would be the dangers if this mandate were to go into effect and they would attempt to end sanctuary cities? You know, the bigger question is there's no definition of sanctuary cities. It's all labeled.
You know what I was thinking? So I did several interviews for jobs right here through the webcam, right? It was like a virtual interview. And with this couch behind me, I wonder if the people interviewing me the entire time were thinking about the casting couch. They're still talking about Project 25? Yes, they're still rambling on about Project 25. They went back to the issue for a little bit. They were talking to the person again, and then they quickly went back and tried to do Project 25 stuff again. Trump bad. Oh, that's what they went back to.
That's been used for years. What would this do to the crime rate in some of our cities?
You know, I think it could potentially increase it. If you deter people from reporting that they have been victims of violent crime for fear of what will happen to them if they report that victimization, all you're doing is creating an enormous class of folk who are going to continue to be victimized, and that can grow. Maybe they will then commit crimes themselves because the whole thing begins to operate outside the rule of law. So, you know, I think, you know, those kind of approaches present real challenges and could increase crime when it sounds like it's designed to decrease crime.
So instead of getting rid of gangs, they'll probably create the formation of more gangs.
It could. And, you know, and I see also in Project 2025 on page 555 that it recommends that they use active duty military personnel to enforce civilian law, which I remember being taught in Army law school years ago. That's a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. So, you know, none of this seems to be all that well thought out.
Right. And then another priority in the mandate's proposal for the Department of Justice, my colleagues, especially Representative Lynch, have already alluded to all this. The mandate reads, and I'll read it again because it's worth repeating. It's at page 569. The next conservative administration must make every effort to obtain the resources to support a vast expansion of the number of appointees in every office and component across the department, especially in the Civil Rights Division, the FBI, and the Executive Office for Immigration Review. So just a complete dismantling of those offices. So in essence, this proposal is to strip the department, including the immigration enforcement, of career civil servants who, of course, would lead probably, if they're concerned about Mr. Allen not having, 2 years of pay, which of course I agree it's concerning. But imagine people who are loyal not to the rule of law, not loyal to the Constitution, have no guidelines because it's all been dismantled. They could probably, anyone that appears before them, they could probably suspend all of them for 2 years and give them no pay because there would be no rules. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and if you have supervisors who are not, making decisions based on the rule of law, the facts and the evidence, but political considerations, my supervisors could tell me, investigate this crime, don't investigate that crime. And if that, determination is not based exclusively on the facts and the law and the victim and the protection of the community, we're going to get in real trouble.
So a case like Mr. Allen could be multiplied into thousands if there's no rules and no regulation, and there wouldn't be an inspector general.
It could
review anything.
And let me go on record as saying
they're saying all this about Project 25 while not realizing that's actually what the meeting is about, but not about Project 25. It's about this guy being fired essentially from his job for his political beliefs. They're fear-mongering in their direction, not realizing that's actually the issue that they need to be taken care of. It's insane, like the mental gymnastics that they're trying to do to support their political affiliation. But we have National Guard planted in the New York subways to stop people who don't pay. Yeah, and that's okay. And when they're talking about the military supporting like civilian laws, the military is not going to do that. There's so many people in the military that once you start trying to tell them that they need to go fight against civilians, they're just not going to do it. They're going to tell you to fuck off. This guy is losing faith in getting his paycheck. It's losing to 25 apparently. Yeah, I could see him just sitting there the entire time like, I'm never getting paid. I'm never going to get this money. These people want to pretend like they care about me, but they don't care at all. They showed up to promote their political party, and that was it. That was the whole point. They're showing up to get some clips. That's it. If they can run this entire time out talking about how Trump is bad, then they think they've won. There's got to be some kind of kickback that they're getting. Because I refuse to believe that they are this stupid that they don't know what this committee is actually about. There has to be some kind of incentive that the Democratic Party is giving them to go out here and speak on all of their agendas. That's the only thing that I could think of is they're being paid for that. This is cringe. Yeah, it is. It's cringe, but it's also frustrating. But I've found everything in our government is usually frustrating.
Support whistleblowers.
Absolutely.
And retaliation against them needs to be stamped out. So
Absolutely.
I just, we have this thing called an adoptive admission. So when somebody says I believe or don't believe something, I just feel compelled to put on the record what I actually believe.
Right. Well, thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I thank the chairman. Inspector General Horowitz, over the past 3 years, I've questioned FBI Director Wray and Attorney General Merrick Garland about the federal assets, such as confidential human sources that were present on January 6th at the Capitol. And they have continuously stonewalled me. We've got no answers whatsoever about this from them. Now, you announced that you were going to do a review of the DOJ response and preparation, mainly preparation, I think, for January 6th. When did you start that review? When did you announce that review?
This is why we always need a continuing resolution every 3 months. When I first read that, I thought you were going to say Revolutionary War. I don't know why that's what I read at first. And I was like, yep, you're on a list now.
We announced it in 2021, but we ended up pausing it because of the
Look at him.
criminal.
Look at the dude. He's like, I'm never getting this money. These people don't give a fuck about me. Look at us. All hope is gone. They've zapped any spirit out of him.
This is consistent with how we perform our work. We reinitiated it last year, and I'm in the process of reviewing a draft of the report.
So 3.5 years ago, it was announced that you'd be doing this review, and we still don't have the review, do we?
No, as I said, the reason is we paused the review because of the ongoing criminal work that would, consistent with our practice, we don't interfere with ongoing criminal investigations.
So, but now that you've restarted it, do you have evidence of the number of confidential human sources that were operating on the Capitol grounds on January 6th?
Our report will include the information in that regard.
Can you tell us today how many there were? Were there more than 100?
I'm not in a position to say that, both because it's in draft form and we have not gone through the classification review. And so I need to be careful on what
So we're 4 years in. The reason to do these reports, I think, is so we don't make this, if there were any mistakes, not to make the same mistakes again, but we are just weeks away from the inauguration. We're 4 years, almost 4 years into this report. When is it going to be released?
It's certainly my hope and expectation.
That guy cried for nothing. Nothing, I tell you. His crying probably came from the frustration of realizing that none of these people care about him or his pay or his family going without food for 2 years because they don't have any money. And then he comes to this crapshoot here and realize that these people don't care either. This is on national TV and they still don't care. Nothing's being done. The government moves at a snail's pace and nobody's going to help him. And what does he do? Like he can't go get food stamps. Technically, he's still working at a job, even though they're not paying him. He's working and not being paid. That's insane when you think about it. I'm surprised that he actually kept the job. I'm surprised he didn't go try to get another job somewhere, which is probably what they wanted. They know what the hearing is about. They just feel that it's unwarranted, but they're here. They are here discussing it. That is the alternative to probably what they're thinking. They're thinking that this man's clearance being suspended was probably justified because of all these reasons that they're mentioning. The Project 25 stuff, which at the time nobody was even talking about. So I don't know why they're bringing it up, but they are.
Although I don't control this entirely because it has to go through a classification review, but certainly in the next couple of months is my hope.
Do you think, is there any consideration for the election about the release of this report? Would you delay it in order to not release it right before the election?
At this point, given the process that has to play out in terms of classification review and all of that, I'm not making any, I don't have to make any judgment about that. We're still, that still has to go on. Just to give you a sense of it, when I did the Pfizer review,
you're saying it's not even going to be done in time for before the election?
It doesn't, I doubt it would be done in time for the election.
Is it going to be done before the inauguration?
That is certainly my hope. And
your hope. We're 4 years into it, and we know what we do know is you're going to expose that there were confidential human sources at the Capitol. Can you tell us today how many went into the Capitol?
So from what he's saying, the article that he issued to his coworkers was actually true, from what they're saying now, and they're waiting to issue the report until after the election. Go figure. Are we surprised? Also, they've already had a few of these hearings. Yeah, I'm coming into this completely blind too. So, that's just me just bullshitting here. This is the worst unemployment insurance interview ever. Exactly. What does this guy do? Because he can't file for unemployment because he's working, but yet he's not being paid.
I'll have that information in the report. I'm not able to speak to information in there, both because it's in draft and we get a response from the department and the FBI, but also because I don't know yet what's classified and not classified.
So if they broke the law, if they went into the Capitol, which we pretty much know there were confidential human sources who went into the Capitol and right there alongside of everybody else, wouldn't they need to follow DOJ CHS protocols? And do you know if those were followed?
They should follow CHS protocols, and again, we'll include that information in the report.
Do you know how many were reimbursed for travel?
As I sit here, I don't recall the number. But I
don't recall, or you won't tell?
We're getting fiber optic in our tiny one-horse town soon. That's pretty badass. Is it the free Google kind? I know a lot of people are getting free internet through Google Fiber.
Well, and if I did know it, I wouldn't be in a position to tell you because we still have to go through.
We're 4 years into this. You're supposed to be the organization that goes and gets these.
Are we talking about January 6th? Yeah, they flipped to January 6th now. They're talking about there being people like insiders in the mob.
Answers when the FBI and the DOJ stonewall Congress. But I feel like, we're 4 years into this. We're not even going to get this information you're telling us now before the election, and maybe not even before the next inauguration. How would we make any corrections or without that information? I want to move on to something else.
Please do.
We've got FBI's failed investigation of the January 6th pipe bomb. Are you looking into that at all?
We've had discussion, I know, Congressman, about it, and we have followed up, and I can speak to you about that.
I mean, they keep saying it's an ongoing investigation, but they've got no leads, no suspects. They've lost information. They've lost evidence. They can't find evidence. Secret Service deleted all of its texts on January 6th. Steve D'Antuono, the guy in charge of Washington, D.C. field office, says that the cell phone data that could have been used to find the bomber was corrupted. And now we just I found out from another inspector general, and I want to submit this for the record.
Objection.
Yeah. I asked him, do you have the footage, the video footage? Does the FBI have the video footage of the DNC on January 6th? And he tells me when he asked the FBI for the video footage, they don't even have video footage of the DNC that we know was created on January 6th. It's almost as if they don't want to know. Can you rule out that there were any confidential human sources involved in the whole pipe bomb thing on January?
No, not free, but Biden's infrastructure bill is making it possible. We've had notoriously horrible internet. You're going to be blazing fast with that. Blazing fast. I've never actually been in a spot where I could get it. I have a mesh router, so that helps a little bit with internet speed, but damn, I wish I could get some fiber. No more ADHD members of Congress. Ooh, something shining January 6th. Ooh, Trump bad. Ooh, Project 25.
January 6th.
It's coming back.
I'd have to go back, Congressman, and refresh myself on what information we've gathered to date on that. I don't know as I sit here.
Okay, that would be a huge revelation.
But I'm happy to come.
I think we should get that and get it public before the election. I yield back.